English translation from May 117th Contact Tuesday, 16th August 2022, 8:16 a.m.
This disease is congenital. On Earth, unfortunately, it is rampant like a plague and is not curable yet. I have to explain. To explain the whole thing, I have to mention earthly terms that are familiar to me because I also follow earthly medicine. Alzheimer's dementia is protracted and drags on for many years until it really appears openly, so it can take 80 years or more until it becomes acute. Then, however, forgetfulness comes quickly, occurring in 3 phases. At some point it begins with the human being's personal behavior appearing strange, which also becomes noticeable to the outside world. Over many years and decades, Alzheimer's dementia creeps into the human beings, because the disease does not come quickly, but very slowly and only imperceptibly. For years and even decades, the human beings themselves do not notice when they are affected. Then, little by little, the first signs appear in the form of memory lapses, which are usually judged to be harmless, but which increase in number and gradually make the human beings unsteady and somehow erratic. They become more and more forgetful and can no longer find their daily utensils. Over time, they get tangled up in the middle of speech and can no longer finish what they have started to say. In this way, the human beings become unable to read anything completely or to concentrate on anything. As the Alzheimer's disease progresses, the abilities relevant to everyday life are lost more and more, with the focus on personal hygiene and food intake. Over time, the human beings become dependent on the help of other human beings to get around and to do everything else. Alzheimer's dementia has a very long asymptomatic pace, which begins as a small child and thus long before adulthood, before the first symptoms even appear. With very close professional observation, the first indications of changes in the direction of Alzheimer's can be detected as early as puberty. This is also the case when amyloidosis skin spots appear and become visible. These are abnormally folded proteins that cluster together and are deposited in the tissue as amyloids, a so-called protein polysaccharide complex. The asymptomatic pace can last for many years, but during this time characteristic biological features and changes in the brain are already recognizable and can be detected. After the asymptomatic pace, the so-called predementia pace begins. This becomes noticeable in daily life from time to time through occasional cognitive failures, such as abilities, attention, memory, learning, creativity, planning, orientation, imagination, reasoning, introspection, will, faith and much more. People with Alzheimer's disease are less able to retain new information, which can take years, during which time a significant decrease in brain mass in the hippocampus can be observed. The progression of Alzheimer's dementia in 3 stages thus once triggers cognitive disturbances such as forgetfulness in everyday life, which have a very clear disturbing effect on human beings over a period of at least half a year. In the early stages, there are slight cognitive impairments, so the ability to remember is reduced, as is concentration. Often, there is a feeling of getting lost or desperately searching for certain words in the middle of a sentence. In addition, the first problems with orientation appear, especially in foreign surroundings. It is not uncommon for human beings in this stage of Alzheimer's dementia to appear very depressed, because they react to their change with fear, grief and shame. For this reason, it is often difficult to distinguish symptomatically between Alzheimer's in the early stages and psychological damage in the form of depression. Even if the disease is detected early, there is no way to do anything about it. Alzheimer's cannot be cured with current earthly medicine for a long time, but the whole course of the disease and its progression can be delayed by appropriate cognitive and psychomotor therapy. Earth humans affected by Alzheimer's can train their coordination and perception, as well as their balance, in the early stages, so that their symptoms can be kept quite stable for years. Alzheimer's dementia has its origins in the fact that the brain of human beings begins before birth with a very protracted process of a cell disease that is very difficult to detect, which then over time practically inevitably triggers a degradation of cell structures. So that cell degradation does not take place only when the human being grows older, but already before birth, because the actual beginning already takes place in the womb. However, earthly science is not yet able to fathom this, because it still lacks any possibility of doing so. That is what I may say without violating our directives.
English translation from May 115th Contact Friday, 29th July 2022, 9:17 a.m.
What you say goes a very long way and brings with it consequences that can by no means be disputed anymore. Overpopulation and anthropogenically caused climate change, which already found their origin in 1844, are now the main protagonists of what evil Earth humans can expect in the coming future. It is only since the 1950s that the correct beginning of the actual impact has been found, and since then everything has developed in such a way that now the really visible impact is emerging, which will greatly expand and intensify in the time to come. What is already spreading and will expand in the future, I will briefly mention in points on. Poisonous influence and also actual chemistry have poisoned all plants on Earth and all life forms of all kinds and species to such an extent that there is nothing left on Earth that is not contaminated by some harmful substance. This also includes the Earth humans themselves, which is indisputable, although earthly scientists nevertheless deny this. For decades, especially since the mid-1980s, the degeneration of logic, intellect and reason in Earth humans has been spreading more and more as a result of gross and rapidly increasing overpopulation. The strength of knowledge has already sunk to such an extent that a stultification is recognizable, which is not only noticeable in the field of learning and in grasping reality and truth as well as in not thinking for oneself, but also in general dealings with fellow human beings. The stultification, however, also shows itself in the senseless and meaningless and very often ridiculous talk and in the primitive forms of expression in the use of language. The stultification of human beings, which also reaches into the world of science and produces nonsensical things, is also becoming more and more conspicuous in our judgment, behavior and dealings with fellow human beings, the animals, the creatures, the very diverse other life forms, the environment and nature, the trees and plants of all genera and species and the waters, as well as the planet itself, the atmosphere and thus also the vital air we breathe. 3. The degeneration caused by the consequence of overburdening Earth humans or overpopulation through the uncontrolled procreation of offspring has an effect on the bodily organs, especially on the fertility of women, who become more and more infertile and unable to conceive. For the degeneration of overpopulation inevitably leads to a decline in the potency and fertility of men as well, and to such changes in their organism that they too become increasingly infertile. 5. Due to the negative effects of overpopulation, namely degeneration in the form of organ changes, women will be more and more affected by breast cancer in the future. 6. Thousands of aerohormones or environmental hormones floating in the air, of which, moreover, very few are known to earthly sense, will be the origin of the increase in diseases, whereby they will have very rare or unknown manifestations, so that they will be known in human medicine dentistry, or veterinary medicine only by hearsay or not at all. 7 organ changes resulting from degeneration will cause more and more attention disorders in Earth humans, which will result in much mischief. 8 Earth humans will lose more and more control over their psyche. Consequently, this will lead to widespread illness and to ever-increasing life crises and more suicides as well as murders, because human beings will also lose control over their behavior and actions. 9 The emerging consequences of climate change for many human beings will be that they will suffer from rising head, fall ill with skin cancer due to the sun's radiation, or succumb to death from heat stroke or heart failure. 10 The religious faith of all religions will be so fanatically promoted again that hatred will arise among Earth humans against one or the other religion, just as racism and acts of murder will also arise from it. 11 Tiny plastic particles, as tiny as microorganisms, or from other artificial substance and chemical poisons and so on endanger the health of Earth humans, animals, wildlife and all other life forms, which also includes all flora, trees and all plants, which in one way or another ingest, inhale or otherwise take up the particles. 12 Climatic and overbreeding changes in the internal organs of the body and brain cause ailments which were normally age-related but which will affect more and more younger human beings in the future, because degeneration affects various organs to such an extent that regulation will no longer be possible. 13 Furthermore, there will also be cognitive deficits, which will occur more and more in the future, such as limitations of memory as well as of speech itself. 14 Preterm births and very low birth weights of newborns will increase, and also hundreds of thousands of babies will die worldwide as a result of life-threatening air and environmental pollution, in addition to the increasing incidence of stillbirths. 15 Autism and heart disease will increase in the future, as will diseases of consciousness, depression and the suicides that result from them. 16 Hyperactivity disorders will also become more and more prevalent in the future, because environmental pollution and air pollution automatically mean that everything will be subject to degeneration. 17 Drugs, alcohol and tobacco will also be the cause of many health-damaging factors in the future, which will continue to cause much evil among Earth humans for a long time to come. Overpopulation and climate change will bring such unimagined changes that Earth humans will no longer be able to cope with them. It is also to be noted that the extinction of species of fauna and flora will continue very rapidly because Earth humans in general do not care to put a stop to all evils above all the anthropogenic evils, mainly the gross overpopulation. In addition to overpopulation and the destruction of the planet, of nature, its fauna, flora and waters, the production of chemicals is also responsible, as well as the poisonous substance and their spreading into nature, namely into the fauna and flora, as well as into the waters and the atmosphere. More than 13 million Earth humans are killed every year by the poisoned air we breathe, most of which is still full of unknown neurohormones or endocrine disruptors for Earth humans. And the great evil is that no Earth human can escape these neurohormones and thus the air pollution that has been and continues to be created anthropogenically. And truly and actually, global air pollution is the leading cause of death of all forms of environmental pollution, as we sadly see time and time again.